You were quoted as saying that, well, let me read the quote and let's talk about it a moment. You said, "I think the United States should undertake a very ambitious new project in space. I think we shouldn't be ashamed to attempt something even though the scientific probability is in doubt. I think we should attempt interplanetary exploration in a manned sense." Do you just think that, or do you sort of plan that with the Space Council?
Well, the Space Council doesn't have the thrust to do any planning right now. We're engaged in a task force effort to present some recommendations to the President by September as to what happens after Apollo, assuming that this is a successful mission. And, of course, we have other Apollo flights to follow. But we feel, we in the task force feel that we must articulate a broad objective for the future. Now, there's a great amount of disagreement among the people who are participating in these discussions. And I would have to say, as I said this morning, that I represent a minority viewpoint in saying that we should be a little bit forthcoming in saying where we're trying to go, even though the technology may not be as advanced as it should be to say it from a sense of scientific probability. I understand this happened once before when President Kennedy made his objective the moon landing. It's very easy to forego the optimistic long-range approach to these things because you can always find 100 reasons not to do it or why it may fail. But with the way science has advanced in the past 50 years, I don't think we'd be out of line in saying, for example, we're going to put a man on Mars by the end of this century. And I think we should do it because based on the rate of progress that we've shown, I think it's possible that even if we don't say it, it's going to happen. I think the people in the country, the average man wants something to look forward to as an objective, as an exciting objective. I know all the objections about the spending of the money, but the space program will probably turn out to be one of our best investments in time.
Do you see any problem, assuming that this mission is successful, if not this one, then Apollo 12, in getting the appropriations for the full 9 Apollo missions, the 9 more Apollo missions for moon exploration?
No, I don't think that that'll be a problem.
And what about then the next step? The space people are talking about then moving on immediately to the large space station, orbiting space station. Do you think the people are ready for that step?
Well, of course, that's a step that probably has to come about as an intermediate move before we could even think about interplanetary explorations. I believe that the public's ready to undertake this venture. All over the country, all over the world, there's just a tremendous enthusiasm about this idea of new frontiers, and frontiers of such magnitude that they make the explorations of Earth explorers look rather puny by comparison.
We, I think, get a little blasé in our country living in the midst of all the technical miracles that we have performed in the United States. We live with them. We're already getting the spin-off in the space thing. Teflon, for instance, just as one small example, and the transistors and all these things. We live with them every day. I think that maybe the American people might find a new inspiration for further excitement towards space exploration when they hear how the world reacts to this feat.
We seem to have our attention more and more directed to the world reaction. Now, last night I had a chance to talk with Colonel Stafford. Commander Cernan just came back from Finland. He found an outpouring of sentiment in that country, an affinity, an identification with the United States. After all, this is something that you can apply patriotism to without the horrors of war. This is a great place to be a little chauvinistic, I think.
Now, the space people point out that it only takes 1/2 of 1% of our gross national product to have enough of a budget for them to go on with the program, $4 billion a year. I've just been handed a note that the Soviet press reported the start of the Apollo 11 mission within minutes of liftoff, indicating the Russians are going to have some pretty fast coverage of this historic flight, I suppose. The TASS news agency dispatch gave the time of the Apollo launch, the names of the crew members. Moscow television, however, did not show the liftoff live, did not interrupt its regular programming to report it, although the liftoff was being shown everywhere else practically around the world, thanks to satellites, part of the...
You know, Walter, bringing up the Soviet press reaction, Commander Cernan had a chance to meet with a cosmonaut who was also visiting Finland. There's a real rapport between the people in these two programs, and I think there are real possibilities for the future in getting cooperative ventures moving, possibly in an exchange of some information, in collaboration on certain hardware for the future, so that we can come to a cooperative stance with the Soviet Union. It may be of immeasurable assistance in disarmament talks and the general diplomacy of the world. And, you know, we're ready. We have an open program. We don't hide anything in this program. We just hope they'll be as forthcoming in the future as we hope they may become as they become more excited about the gains that are being made.
Are there any plans in the administration to make another open offer to the Soviet Union for cooperation once we reach the moon?
Well, I'm not certain. That, of course, is a decision that can only be made by the president, and I know he's considering all the factors involved. We want to do everything we can possibly do to reduce tension in the world, whether it's in the space program, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in the Far East, whatever, in whatever case, in general disarmament. But I think we've got to be pragmatic enough to realize that some indication of acceptance of this idea has to come from the other side, and not just in talk, a little bit in action.
Maybe the space station would be the way to do it. We could put up one great space station which we all could launch out toward the distant planets. Maybe we'll get to it at that point.
I think it offers a great chance for cooperation.
Thank you very much, Vice President
Pleasure to
Agnew. I
be
know
with
they're
you.
waiting for you over at the firing room.
Thank you for having
I'll talk
me.
to the fellows over there. Thank you very much, sir. Dave. Vice President Agnew was here to watch this momentous occasion, this launch of Apollo 11, in his capacity as the chairman of the President's Space Council, and gave us some words of encouragement as to the administration's hopes and his hopes for the future of manned space flight. The flight of Apollo 11 going very well at this point. Some 41 minutes into the flight. They're about halfway around the world now. They should be out over the Indian Ocean approaching Perth, Australia, I should think, at this time. The orbit is now stabilized at a perfect 118 by 118 miles. They're in circular orbit, and we're told that their heart rates for this flight, just been revealed to us, were far below what each of them recorded on their first Gemini flight. They've each had one flight before. Armstrong, Collins, and Aldrin all had a Gemini flight. And just listen to this. These are some pretty cool test pilots up there. As you can see on your screen right now, we're showing some of the crowd beginning to leave the area here of the Manned Space Center. Some of the crowd that some have estimated as high as 1 million persons, crowds that jammed the roads for miles around to watch the launch. But listen to these heart rates. Armstrong had a heart rate at liftoff of 110. He had a 146 on his Gemini flight. Collins was down to 99. He had 125 on his first flight. Aldrin came in low at only 88, and in the first Gemini flight, he also was low at 110. But what cool, unexcitable test pilots these men are. They sit there on top of that huge Saturn rocket, 36 stories high, up there, on top of all of that explosive fuel, those engines pounding out 7.5 million pounds of thrust on the liftoff. They're making this historic flight for man to go to the moon, and their heartbeat is down at that point. It's remarkable. I don't think that, I doubt that my heartbeat was anything like that in the excitement of liftoff from here. CBS News color coverage of the launch day of Apollo 11 will continue in a moment. The flight of Apollo 11 now halfway around the Earth on the first orbit of the Earth. When it reaches this point on the second orbit, it will be preparing to fire the third stage engines and go into its trajectory toward the moon. It is approaching Carnarvon, the tracking station on the west coast of Australia, north of Perth. As you see out over the Indian Ocean, all the reports from the astronauts have been most encouraging. Apparently all the systems are functioning well. We've got another very successful spacecraft in Earth orbit, and now for even more difficult phases of the flight ahead.